an author with Pieces of Learning. I'm delighted to be able to be here today and talk to you a little bit about my book, Teaching Tools for the 21st Century, and the companion PowerPoint, over 500 PowerPoints that go along with this book if you want to use it for your own staff development or, for example, in a professional learning community. I always say that this book has a little bit of everything in it. When I wrote it, I told my husband, everything that's in my head is in this book, and in a way that's still really true. The title kind of gives an idea of exactly what's in it. We need some really specific tools as we teach in the 21st century. We need a lot of tools, and this book is really our toolbox for teaching in this new age. The table of contents, many people tell me, reads very much like perhaps a methods course in an undergrad teaching course. So we have things like, we start out with creative teaching. How do we do creative teaching in the 21st century? What's required in terms of making sure that our students are learning and thinking in new and innovative ways? The next chapter talks about learning styles, followed by learning modalities, followed by Bloom's taxonomy, followed by multiple intelligences. In writing this book, I took a look at many different theories about how students learn, and I picked 4 because I thought those 4 were very representative of the theories that we like to take a look at and say, these are theories that are the research background for what we're doing in education. So you will find not only the theories in those 4 chapters, but also how we take each one of those theories, develop units of work based on those theories, and use them in the classroom. Following that, there's a chapter on assessment. I sometimes think that assessment is sort of the ruler of all things educational, and assessment certainly is a most important piece of what we do as educators. So talk a little bit about standardized assessment. That's been a huge topic for the first decade of the 21st century. But then a lot about our performance assessments, or authentic assessments as they're sometimes called. How do we set those up? How do we write rubrics? How do we write criteria cards? How do we do checklists or student logs or portfolios? All of those are in the chapter on assessment. We go from there then to what I would call some of the issues in 21st century education. There's a chapter on cultural and linguistic diversity. How do we teach students from different ethnic cultures? How do we teach students who are linguistically diverse, particularly students where English is not their first language? Sometimes we have cultural diversity and not linguistic diversity, and sometimes we have linguistic and not cultural, and sometimes we have both. This chapter hits all of those things. How do we work particularly with students who have maybe come here from another place, who speak another language in their home, don't speak English in their home? So that's what that chapter is about. The next chapter, we're to chapter 10 now, is on the inclusion of students with special needs. I talk a lot about how these students are, yes, so much a part of a diverse classroom. How do we make sure that we're teaching them in a correct way? How do we do pre-assessments and formative assessments for them? One of the big new areas in education is something called RTI. I touch on that in this chapter. If you're interested in that even more, there would be another book that you might be interested in called Differentiation, RTI, and Achievement, how they work together. So this is really an overview, but if you want the overview of RTI, that's a place that you can get that. Following the chapter on special needs students is a chapter called Educating Our Gifted Students. My personal opinion, and not only that, but a lot of the research that's out there says the students making the least amount of progress in the first decade of the 21st century are indeed our gifted students. How do we make sure that we cater to their needs? How do we differentiate for these students? How do we do things like curriculum compacting and tiered lessons and units and flexible grouping? How do we check ourselves to make sure that we are meeting their needs? All of those issues are covered in the chapter on educating our gifted students. Following that is a chapter on conflict. How do we deal with conflict? Conflict obviously is something that potentially could happen anytime two people are together, but I take a look at conflict between, for example, two teachers, two students, two groups of students, teachers and administrators, teachers and parents. How do we deal with all of those inevitable conflicts that happen during the life that we have at school together? Finally, the last two chapters, we have one on parent-teacher collaboration. A lot of research has been done about if parents collaborate with teachers, the education of students is richer and better. Sounds really great, but how do you actually do that? In this chapter, we start out with, what do parents and teachers have in common with each other? What memories do both groups have, perhaps of their school years, that might be different than the 21st century? How do we do a parent conference that's going to be rich and meaningful to both the teacher and the parent? How do we communicate with one another on a day-to-day or a week-to-week basis? How do we communicate together to the student so the student knows what we are doing as a team, parent and teacher? All of those things are in the chapter on parent-teacher collaboration. And then finally, the last chapter deals with technology. Technology is a part of our lives, not just the lives the lives of students in school, but it's really a part of all of our lives. How do we incorporate that very important piece into our life in school? That chapter gives lots of suggestions on how to do that. It is not a how-to chapter in terms of, here's a particular technological instrument, here's how you use it, because you know those change from day to day and week to week. The technology chapter is really about how do we embed, how do we incorporate technology into everything that we do in schools. So if this book sounds interesting to you, it sounds like maybe a great overview or a great study book, I certainly hope that you will get it and that you will read it, and that you will also take a look perhaps at the companion PowerPoint, so that if people are studying it together, the PowerPoint would be a wonderful staff development tool that you can use in your school or in your school district. Thank you so much. It's been great talking to you.